AITA for leaving after my wife paid the guru who turned her against me? My name is Brad. I'm 34, and for the last 6 years, I was married to Melissa, the person I genuinely thought I would grow old with. I work as a civil engineer, which sounds more exciting than it is, but mostly means I spend my days arguing with drainage plans and contractors who definitely read the email. We had a house in the suburbs, a shared checking account, a Sunday grocery routine, and a running joke that our biggest marital crisis was whether the garage should belong to my tools or her seasonal decorations. Back then, I thought our life was boring in the best possible way. We both worked. We both paid bills. We had a shared Google Calendar with normal married people stuff on it. Dentist appointments, mortgage auto-pay reminders, oil changes, Costco, every other Sunday, and Friday takeout if neither of us felt like cooking. We had a savings account we called the Future Fund, even though some months it was more like the Emergency Water Heater Fund. We talked about kids someday, not in a dreamy movie way, but in the practical way people do when they are trying to build something real. Could we afford daycare? Would we need to finish the basement first? Which one of us would panic more during kindergarten registration? Melissa was 33. She was smart, funny, and for most of our marriage, steady. She had this habit of reading recipes out loud from her phone and then ignoring half the instructions. She liked making the house feel warm. In October, she put little pumpkins everywhere. In December, she became emotionally attached to throw pillows with snowflakes on them. I used to tease her that if I stood still too long, she would decorate me too. I was not a perfect husband. I could get quiet when I was stressed. I sometimes thought fixing the garbage disposal counted as emotional availability. I had a bad habit of over-explaining when I felt misunderstood, like if I just found the perfect arrangement of words, everything would click. But I was loyal. I came home. I listened when she said something mattered. I was proud of the life we had built. Then, during the last year of our marriage, Melissa started getting restless. At first, it did not look like anything dramatic. She listened to more podcasts while folding laundry. She started following women online who talked about self-discovery, feminine energy, and deconstructing the roles we inherit. I did not think much of it. Everyone gets into things. I had once spent 3 months watching videos about woodworking, even though the only thing I successfully made was a crooked shelf in the garage. She changed her hair, bought different clothes, started journaling on the couch with a seriousness that made me feel like I should not interrupt. I actually thought it was good for her. She had been saying she felt ordinary, stuck, and invisible at work. If some online community made her feel encouraged, I was not going to make fun of it. One night, after dinner, everything shifted. We had eaten grilled chicken, rice, and a bagged salad we both pretended was better than it was. The plates were still in the sink. The TV was paused on some home renovation show where a couple was acting surprised that removing a wall cost money. Melissa sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap. "Brad," she said, calm enough that I knew whatever was coming had been rehearsed. "I think we need to talk about intimacy." I muted the TV, even though it was already paused. "Okay," I said. "What about it?" She took a breath. "I think physical intimacy has become a crutch for us." I blinked. A crutch? Yes. Something we use to avoid deeper connection. I gave a small laugh because I honestly thought she was making a point from a podcast, and we were about to discuss it like normal people. She did not laugh. "I want us to try a sexless marriage," she said. I stared at her. "A what?" "A sexless marriage. At least for the foreseeable future. I need to reclaim my identity outside of being a wife, outside of being available, outside of being expected." The room felt suddenly too quiet. I said, "Are you saying you want a break from sex? Because if something is wrong, we can talk about that." "That response is exactly what I mean," she said. "You hear a boundary and immediately make it about your loss." I sat back. "I'm not trying to make it about my loss. I'm trying to understand what changed between yesterday and now." It didn't change yesterday. I've been waking up. That was the first time she used that phrase. Waking up. She said it like I was still asleep, and she had crossed into some room I could not enter. I asked if she was unhappy. I asked if something had happened. I asked if I had pressured her without realizing it. I asked if she wanted counseling. Melissa's face tightened at that. "Therapy often centers male comfort," she said. "I'm not interested in paying someone to teach me how to tolerate my own oppression." I remember looking around our living room like the answer might be sitting between the basket of throw blankets and a side table with our wedding photo on it. Oppression, I said. She looked at me with pity. That was worse than anger. I know that word scares you. No, I said slowly. The word doesn't scare me. Hearing my wife use it about our marriage scares me. She stood up and carried her glass to the kitchen. I'm not going to debate my truth tonight. I slept badly. Melissa slept at the far edge of the bed, curled away from me under a separate blanket. For the first few days, I tried to be patient. I told myself this might be one of those moments in a marriage where one person hits an emotional wall and the other person has to slow down instead of taking it personally. I did not touch her unless she initiated it, which she did not. I asked more careful questions. I made sure I was doing my share around the house. I cooked dinner twice that week, even though my main skill was turning chicken into something technically edible. But every conversation felt like walking through a hallway where all the doors had been labeled wrong. If I asked, "Do you want tacos or pasta tonight?" she said, "I don't want to manage your dinner decisions for you." If I said, "Do you still want to go out Friday?" she said, "I'm noticing you seek external validation when I create space." If I asked whether she was mad at me, she said, "Your discomfort is not always my responsibility." One night I finally said, "Melissa, I'm not asking you to perform happiness. I'm asking why our marriage suddenly has terms I didn't agree to." She looked up from her phone. Marriage has always had terms. You only notice them when they stop benefiting you. I stared at her for a few seconds, trying to find my wife inside that sentence. No, I said. I notice because the person I share a mortgage with is talking to me like I'm a case study. She smiled without warmth. That defensiveness is useful information. After that, the house got colder. Not physically. The thermostat still sat at 70 because Melissa hated being cold and I hated arguments about the heating bill. But the emotional temperature dropped every week. She stopped kissing me hello. She stopped texting me little things during the day. She used to send photos of weird snacks at the grocery store or a dog sticking its head out of a car window. Now she left my messages on read unless they were about logistics. She started taking calls in the laundry room. That room became her private booth. I would hear the dryer thumping unevenly, her voice low behind the door, and sometimes a soft laugh I had not heard directed at me in weeks. She angled her laptop away when I walked by. She changed her phone passcode. Her phone was always face down, always within reach. I hated where my mind went. I wondered if she was cheating. I am not proud of that. I did not want to be the suspicious husband checking shadows. But when your wife suddenly removes affection, hides her phone, whispers behind closed doors, and calls your questions control, your mind goes places whether you invite it or not. The strange part was that she did not act like someone guilty in the usual way. She acted righteous. She was not nervous when I entered a room. She was annoyed, like my presence interrupted something more important. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs and found her at the kitchen island with earbuds in, nodding at her laptop. There was an online meeting open. I saw a grid of women's faces before she snapped the computer halfway shut. "Morning," I said. She pulled out one earbud. "You scared me. I live here. I'm in Circle." "In what?" "My women's circle." I glanced at the laptop. "Is that the online group?" Her expression hardened. "It's a feminine empowerment collective." I poured coffee, mostly to give my hands something to do. "Okay, how long have you been doing that?" "Long enough to realize I've been outsourcing my intuition to a marriage structure." I almost laughed again, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like something generated by an app that made normal sentences worse. "Instead," I said, "do they tell you to talk like that?" She closed the laptop all the way. "No, they give me language for things I already knew." That became another phrase. Give me language. Every new accusation arrived dressed as language someone else had handed her. The group was led by a woman named Alexandra. Early 40s, polished, calm, with the kind of online presence that looked soft until you read between the lines. Melissa described her as a guide. Not a therapist, not a coach exactly, but a guide. Alexandra ran workshops, private sessions, digital circles, and something Melissa called identity reclamation work. I said, "Is she licensed?" Melissa rolled her eyes. "That's such a patriarchal question." "It's a normal question when someone is influencing my wife." "She's not influencing me. She's supporting me." I should have pushed harder then. But at that point, I was still trying to save the marriage by being reasonable. I thought if I stayed calm enough, she would eventually hear herself. She did not. The breaking point started with a tablet. Melissa had an older tablet she mostly used for recipes and streaming shows in the kitchen. One evening, she left it on the counter while she went upstairs. I was unloading the dishwasher when the screen lit up with a notification. I did not touch it at first. I just saw the preview. Alexandra, do not let his sadness make you abandon your awakening. His confusion is resistance from the patriarchal bond. I stood there holding a coffee mug, staring at those words. His sadness. That meant Melissa had been talking about me. About us. Maybe about the conversation we had just had the night before, where I had told her I missed my wife and she told me I was centering abandonment anxiety. Another notification appeared. Alexandra, tonight's Breaking the Bond session will help you name the invisible contracts he benefits from. Breaking the Bond. That was the session title. Not healing, not communication, not marriage clarity. Breaking the Bond. I set the mug down carefully because my hand had started shaking. When Melissa came back downstairs, I was still in the kitchen. Who is Alexandra? I asked. She stopped in the doorway. My guide, she said. What is breaking the bond? Her eyes flicked to the tablet. You read my messages? A notification popped up on the kitchen counter. So you invaded my privacy. No. Your tablet lit up in our kitchen with a message about me being a patriarchal bond. You're proving the point right now. I laughed once, flat and tired. Of course I am. She crossed her arms. You're not worried about me. You're worried you're losing access to me. I'm worried my wife is sending private pieces of our marriage to a stranger who talks about me like I'm a disease. She understands what you can't. And what is that? That love can be another word for possession. I stared at her. Melissa, do you honestly believe I possess you? She did not answer directly. That told me more than a yes would have. The next morning at work, I must have looked awful because Derek asked if I was dying or just married. Derek was 36, worked 2 desks over from me, and had been through a quiet divorce 2 years earlier. He was not bitter in a loud way. He was the kind of guy who could make a joke about divorce paperwork and then tell you exactly which documents to save. We were in the break room, drinking coffee that tasted like someone had filtered it through cardboard. I told him enough. Not everything, but enough. The sexless marriage demand. The online group. Alexandra. The messages. Derek leaned against the counter and said, I'm not saying she's cheating. That's comforting. I'm saying you need to stop treating confusion like a plan. I rubbed my face. What does that mean? It means you're trying to understand words while ignoring behavior. When someone starts calling accountability control, check the bank statements. I looked at him. He shrugged. Joint accounts make people brave. I wanted to say Melissa would never do that. I wanted to defend the version of her I still carried in my head. But a small part of me, the part that had been listening to her talk in scripts for weeks, went quiet. That night, after she went to bed, I opened our banking app at the kitchen island. The account was supposed to be boring. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, gas, streaming subscriptions, insurance, the occasional dinner out. Melissa and I both contributed. We had always been transparent about money. At least, I thought we had. At first, nothing jumped out. Then I started filtering by date and amount. A charge for $299 to Collective Renewal LLC. Another for $499 to Awaken Intensive. A $150 Liberation Circle donation. A $900 private coaching package. Several smaller charges that looked like subscriptions. Another $1,200 payment labeled Identity Session Bundle. I opened a spreadsheet because that is what I do when panic needs a place to sit. By the time I finished, the total was $4,780. $4,780 from our joint checking account. Not from her personal spending money. Not from a credit card I did not know about. From the account we used for the mortgage, utilities, groceries, weekend spending, and the savings transfers we had agreed to make for future kids and house repairs. Some charges had happened during the same month Melissa told me we should cut back on expenses because financial simplicity creates emotional clarity. I had skipped replacing a cracked phone screen because we were being mindful. Meanwhile, she had paid $900 for a private session with Alexandra. It was not one bad decision. It was a pattern with receipts. I sat at the kitchen island until almost 2 a.m., scrolling through the bank app, my coffee cold beside me. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Upstairs, Melissa slept like nothing had happened. The next day, I printed the statements at work because our home printer jammed if you asked it to do more than 2 pages and a prayer. The office printer spat out page after page while I stood there pretending I was waiting on drainage specs. Derek walked by, saw my face, and did not joke. "How bad?" he asked. "Almost 5 grand. He exhaled through his nose. "Attorney. I don't even know if I want a divorce." I didn't say divorce. I said attorney. You need to know what not to do before you do something stupid. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney named Marcia. Before I met her, though, I found the PDF. Melissa had left her laptop open in the small office we shared. I was not digging through her personal journal or reading old love letters. I was looking for a utility bill download because I needed the account number for the attorney intake form. Her email was open, and right there in the inbox was a message from Alexandra's group. Subject line: Your Liberation Guide plus private reflection prompts. I know some people will say I should not have opened it. Maybe in a healthier marriage, I would agree. But by then, joint money was missing, my private marriage was being discussed with strangers, and I was being told every question I asked was control. So I opened it. The PDF was called the Liberation Guide. It looked professional. Soft beige design, clean fonts, little quotes in cursive. The kind of thing that could pass as wellness content if you only glanced at it. Then I read it. One section was called Refusing Intimacy Without Absorbing His Discomfort. Another was reframing his questions as control. Another was preparing your exit from traditional marriage. There were scripts. When he asks why intimacy has changed, remember, clarity can be a doorway for negotiation. You do not owe him access to the terms of your awakening. When he requests counseling, ask whether he is seeking mutual growth or a professional witness to restore his comfort. When he expresses sadness, name it without absorbing it. His sadness is not proof of love. It is the discomfort of losing unconscious access. When he asks for financial transparency, notice whether money is being used to re-establish authority. I felt sick. Not because Melissa had doubts about our marriage. Doubts can be honest. Not because she wanted space. Space can be necessary. I felt sick because someone had handed my wife a script that turned every attempt at communication into evidence against me. There were reflection prompts too. List 3 ways your partner benefits from your silence. Write down the fears that arise when you imagine him no longer approving of you. Who are you if you stop performing partnership? Then I saw a highlighted line near the bottom, probably from Melissa. Resistance from him means the bond is weakening. Stay close to the circle. Stay close to the circle. That night, I did not confront her right away. That was the hardest thing I have ever done. I wanted to slam the PDF on the table and ask when exactly she decided I was the villain in a story Alexandra was selling by the hour. But Derek's words were in my head. Attorney first. Marcia's office was in a plain building with bad parking and worse coffee. She was in her late 50s, sharp without being cruel, and had the calm expression of someone who had heard every version of heartbreak and knew where the paperwork lived. I sat across from her with a folder full of statements, screenshots, and notes. My hands kept moving, straightening the edges of the paper. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "First, do not drain the account. Do not threaten her. Do not destroy property. Do not send a 12-paragraph text written at midnight." I wasn't planning to destroy anything. You'd be surprised how many people become poets and arsonists during divorce. Despite everything, I almost smiled. She tapped the folder. "You can be heartbroken later. Right now, be organized." She explained what I could legally do. Open a separate account. Change my direct deposit. Continue paying essential household bills for the time being, especially the mortgage and utilities, so nobody could accuse me of financial sabotage. Stop funding optional expenses, workshops, subscriptions, and shared discretionary spending. Preserve records. Communicate in writing when necessary. Do not get pulled into emotional traps. Revenge feels good for a day, Marcia said. Documentation protects you for months. I don't want revenge, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. Then don't confuse leaving with revenge. That line stayed with me. 2 nights later, I confronted Melissa in the kitchen. I picked the kitchen because everything important in our marriage had somehow happened there. Bills paid at the island. Grocery lists written on the fridge. Arguments about whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher. Her private calls in the laundry room, just off to the side. I laid the printed bank statements on the table. Then I laid down the pages from the Liberation Guide. Melissa walked in wearing headphones around her neck. She looked from the papers to me. "What is this?" she asked. "Receipts." Her face changed, but only for a second. "For what?" "For Collective Renewal LLC. Awaken Intensive. Liberation Circle Donation. Identity Session Bundle. Private Coaching with Alexandra." She picked up the top page, then put it down like it had burned her. "You went through our finances?" "Our finances," I said. "Yes." "That is controlling." I stared at her. "You spent $4,780 from our joint account, and your response is that I'm controlling for noticing?" "It was for my healing. It was from the mortgage account. That money belongs to both of us." "Exactly. Both of us. Which means you do not secretly send almost $5,000 to a woman who teaches you to call me oppressive when I ask why my wife stopped touching me." Her eyes flashed. "You are proving every single thing she said you would do." I pointed to the PDF. "She gave you scripts, Melissa. Actual scripts." "She gave me language." "No. She gave you a way to never be accountable." Melissa folded her arms. She would not look at the statements anymore. "You're threatened because I'm reclaiming my identity." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't reclaim your identity. You rented it from a stranger for almost $5,000. Her face went red. "How dare you reduce my growth to money?" "I'm not reducing your growth to money. I'm saying our bills are real, our savings were real, and my privacy was real before you turned it into content for Alexandra's group calls." She went still. That told me I was right. I had suspected she shared things, but her expression confirmed it. Not guilt exactly. More like being caught with a drawer open. "What did you tell them?" I asked. She looked away. "Melissa, I needed support." "What did you tell them?" She rubbed her forehead. "That you were struggling with my boundaries. That you were emotionally dependent. That we had patterns around intimacy and money. Our sex life." She did not answer. "Our finances." "I didn't use your name." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Like anonymity made betrayal clean. I said, "You let strangers discuss the most private parts of our marriage while they were charging you to see me as the obstacle." She whispered, "You don't understand." "No," I said. "I do. That's the problem." She got louder then. Called me toxic. Called me patriarchal. Said I was weaponizing money. Said I wanted a submissive wife. Said my calmness was manipulative because it made her look unstable. I stood there and took it, not because I agreed, but because something inside me had finally stopped reaching for her. When she finished, breathing hard, I said, "I'm not going to keep auditioning for the role of decent husband in front of an audience that profits when I fail." She scoffed. "So what? You're punishing me now?" "No. I'm done funding the people teaching you to hate me." That night, I slept in the guest room. Actually, I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle. Around midnight, I heard Melissa in the laundry room again, voice low, probably on a call. I could not make out the words, but I heard her crying. 6 months earlier, that sound would have pulled me out of bed. I would have knocked softly, asked if she needed anything, apologized for whatever part of the fight I could own. I would have tried to explain myself better. This time, I stayed still. That night, I understood something simple. I did not need to win the argument. I needed to leave the room. After that, I stopped debating. Melissa seemed to think my silence meant I was finally absorbing her truth. She became almost smug. She would say things like, "I'm glad you're finally doing the work, Brad," while I was mentally reviewing a list of documents to copy. I opened a separate bank account. I changed my direct deposit. I did not touch her paycheck or empty our joint account. I kept enough money flowing to cover the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and groceries through the end of the month, exactly as Marcia advised. But the workshops, subscriptions, private sessions, and whatever else Alexandra was selling were no longer getting funded by my income. I downloaded statements. I copied tax returns. I put my passport, birth certificate, social security card, truck title, and insurance papers in a folder. I removed a few sentimental items slowly. My grandfather's watch from the dresser, 2 framed photos from a hiking trip with Derek, the little wooden box my dad made me when I graduated college. I did not take wedding photos off the walls. I did not break anything. I did not leave the house in chaos. I rented a modest apartment with rental carpet, cheap blinds, and a folding table that became my first desk. The place smelled faintly like new paint and old air conditioning. It was not beautiful, But when I stood in the empty living room with the keys in my hand, I felt something I had not felt at home in months. I felt unobserved. I felt safe. On a Friday evening, Melissa scheduled a private session during what used to be our date night. We used to get Thai food or burgers, nothing fancy, just a way to end the week together. That Friday, she came downstairs in a loose sweater, holding her laptop. "I have a session at 7, she said. "I'd appreciate quiet in the house." I was standing by the garage door, keys in hand. "Sure," I said. She smiled slightly. "I know this has been uncomfortable, but I'm proud of you for respecting my boundaries." Behind her, in the garage, my truck already had 2 storage bins in it. "I've learned a lot about boundaries," I said. She did not catch the tone. Or maybe she heard it and decided it meant progress. At 7, she went into the office and closed the door. I heard Alexandra's voice faintly through the wall, smooth and calm. Something about transition and embodied courage. I moved quietly. Clothes from my side of the closet. Shoes. Work boots. Toiletries. The last of my personal documents. My toolbox from the garage. Not all of it, just enough. I had already taken the rest over little by little. I left the house clean. I was not trying to punish the walls. I paused in the bedroom before I left. My side of the closet was empty. Melissa's dresses and cardigans still hung there, pushed slightly into the space mine used to fill. The bed was made, 2 separate blankets folded like a symbol neither of us had meant to create. For a second, grief hit me so hard I had to sit down. This was the room where we had planned vacations, argued about paint colors, laughed until midnight over dumb videos. This was where she used to put her cold feet against my legs and I would complain, then let her do it anyway. This was where she told me, for years earlier, that she felt lucky we were not one of those couples who treated marriage like a battlefield. I still loved the woman who said that, but she was not the one I was living with anymore. I went downstairs and placed one envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a letter, not a speech, not a list of insults, just the facts. "Melissa, I have moved out. I will be communicating through attorneys about the house, finances, and next steps. I have separated my income from the joint account. Essential bills are covered through the end of the month. I will not continue funding workshops, coaching, circles, subscriptions, or any optional expenses connected to Alexandra or the collective. I have copies of the bank statements, receipts, and materials purchased from our joint funds. You wanted a sexless marriage. I'm giving you a husbandless one. Brad." I did not leave my wedding ring on the table. That would have felt like a stunt. I kept it in a drawer at the apartment because I did not know what else to do with 6 years of my life. Then I turned off the kitchen light and left. The call started at 8:43. I know because I was sitting at my folding table in the apartment, eating drive-through fries that had gone cold, when my phone lit up. Melissa calling. I let it ring. Then again. Then texts. "Where are you?" "Brad, answer the phone. This is not okay. You can't just leave because I set boundaries. You're abandoning me to punish me. You need to come home right now." Then, about 20 minutes later, the tone changed. "Why is your paycheck not pending in the joint account?" "Brad, did you seriously get a lawyer? Please answer. This is scaring me." I did not respond that night. Marcia had told me not to engage while emotions were high, and for once in my life, I did not over-explain. I sat in that apartment with cheap blinds and a folding table, listening to my phone buzz, and I let silence do what my words never could. The next morning, I sent one text. "I am safe. I will communicate about legal and financial matters through Marcia. Do not use joint funds for Alexandra or the collective." She called again. I did not answer. By noon, Renee called. Renee was Melissa's younger sister, 31, and one of the few people in Melissa's life who could challenge her without turning it into a war. At first, Renee had supported the self-discovery thing. She had even told me once, gently, that Melissa needed room to grow and that maybe I should not take it personally. When I answered, Renee sounded different. "Brad," she said, "what happened?" "You should ask Melissa." I did. "She's saying you financially abandoned her because she joined a support group." "That is not what happened." There was a pause. "How much money?" Renee asked quietly. I closed my eyes. $4,780 from our joint account. Renee swore under her breath. "And there's more," I said. She shared private details about our marriage. Alexandra's materials include scripts for refusing intimacy, reframing questions as control, and preparing an exit. Renee was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "Can you send me something? Not everything. Just enough that I can understand what I'm walking into." I checked with Marcia before sending anything. She told me to be careful, send only what involved shared finances and the group's public-facing materials, and avoid turning it into a family trial. So I sent Renee screenshots of the charges and a few pages from the guide. She called back an hour later, furious in a way I had never heard from her. "This is not a support group," she said. "This is a funnel." A funnel. That was the right word. Renee had done some digging. Alexandra had different levels of access. Free social media posts about feminine awakening, low-cost group circles, then private sessions, then intensives, then something called the Liberation Guide package, then higher-cost separation support. Every step made the previous step seem insufficient. Every doubt was reframed as proof you needed more work. Melissa, apparently, had reached out to Alexandra that morning in a panic. Renee sent me a screenshot Melissa had forwarded her. "Melissa, Brad left. He separated the money. He said attorneys. I don't know what to do. I need help. Alexandra, his departure confirms the process is working. The bond will often thrash when access is interrupted. Melissa, I need a refund for the sessions I haven't used. I may need legal help now. Alexandra, payments are non-refundable, as stated in the energetic commitment agreement. Separation pain is a sign you are ready for the next level. I recommend the Sovereign Separation Healing Package. We can begin with a discounted initiation of $1,800. There it was. Not comfort, not accountability, not even concern. A sales pitch. Renee told me Melissa went quiet after that. Not the cold, rehearsed quiet she had used on me. A different kind. The kind that happens when a person sees the floor drop out under something they thought was solid. Over the next week, I heard pieces through attorneys and Renee. Melissa canceled payments. She tried to get refunds and got nowhere. She left the group chat after Alexandra posted some vague message about women who return to fear when comfort is withdrawn. A few other women messaged Melissa privately and admitted they had spent thousands too. Renee helped her report the group to the payment platform and file complaints where she could, though nobody promised anything would come of it. And then Melissa asked to see me. Marcia advised against meeting alone at the house. So we met at a diner on a Tuesday afternoon, neutral and public. Vinyl booths. Coffee that tasted burned. A waitress who called everyone honey and moved like she had seen every possible version of human disappointment. Melissa was already there when I arrived. She looked older than she had 6 months earlier. So did I, probably. Her hair was pulled back. No dramatic makeup, no laptop, no journal, no polished phrases. Just Melissa in a gray sweater, staring at a mug she had not touched. "Thank you for coming," she said. I sat across from her. "I'm not here to negotiate without attorneys." "I know." The silence between us felt huge. She looked down at her hands. I left the group. I heard. I started real therapy. With someone licensed. "That's good." Her mouth trembled a little. I thought I was finding myself. I think I was just scared, and they gave me someone to blame. I did not say anything. She wiped under one eye. I was scared of being ordinary. Of waking up 10 years from now with kids and bills and a life that looked fine from the outside but felt like I disappeared inside it. And then Alexandra started saying things that made my fear feel important. Like I wasn't restless. I was oppressed. Like I wasn't confused, I was awakening. I looked at her and felt that old reflex rise in me, the need to comfort her. The need to say, "It's okay," even when it was not. I held still. Melissa said, "I let strangers rewrite you in my head." "Yes," I said. She flinched, but nodded. "I shared things I shouldn't have shared." "Yes." "And I spent money I had no right to spend like that." "Yes." "I'm going to pay back what I can. I already moved money from my personal savings. It won't be all of it right away, but I'll make it right." I believe she meant it. That was the hardest part. She was not performing anymore. She was not saying holding space or deconstructing access. She was just a woman who had made choices and could finally see the damage. She looked at me with wet eyes. "Can we not decide everything right now?" I took a slow breath. "Melissa, the problem isn't only that they manipulated you. The problem is how easily you believed I was the enemy." She started crying then, silently. I continued, because if I stopped, I knew I might soften the truth until it became something else. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how relieved you looked when someone finally gave you permission to hate me. She covered her mouth. I did not hate you, she whispered. You treated me like you did. I was wrong. I know. I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. Her eyes lifted, hopeful for half a second. I hated that I had to be the one to kill that hope. But I'm still divorcing you, I said. She stared at me. I kept my voice steady. I can understand that you were vulnerable. I can understand that Alexandra knew what to say. I can even understand why the language appealed to you. But I cannot rebuild a marriage with someone who turned our private life over to strangers, spent our money behind my back, and then called me controlling when I found out. She looked down again. I don't know who I am without this marriage, she said. I looked around the diner, at the chipped edge of the table, the sugar packets in a little metal holder, the waitress refilling coffee 2 booths over. I don't either, I said. But I know who I became trying to stay in it. I don't want to be him anymore. We sat there a while longer. There was no dramatic ending. No shouting. No hug that fixed everything. Eventually she asked if I wanted anything from the house that I had forgotten. I named a few things. She wrote them down on a napkin. When we stood up, she said, I really am sorry, Brad. I know, I said. Then I walked out to my truck and sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes before I could drive. The divorce took months. It was not clean in the way people mean when they want pain to be efficient, but it was cleaner than it could have been. Melissa cooperated more than I expected after the diner meeting. She repaid a portion of the money from her personal savings and agreed in writing to account for the rest during settlement. She stayed in therapy. Renee kept checking on her, but she also stopped making excuses for her. Alexandra's collective did not collapse overnight. Groups like that rarely do. They soften their language, change their branding, and keep selling. But Melissa was not in it anymore. A few women who had messaged her privately left too. Renee sent me one update months later that Alexandra had changed the name of the Liberation Guide package to something gentler, which somehow made me angrier than if she had admitted what it was. I did not respond. That was no longer my battlefield. The house was sold. The first time I walked through it after Melissa moved out, it felt smaller than I remembered. The kitchen island where I had laid the receipts looked ordinary again. Just stone and cabinets in afternoon light. The laundry room door was open. Empty shelves, dust in the corners, no whispered calls. I stood in the garage for a moment, looking at the space where my tools used to be and where Melissa used to stack bins of seasonal decorations. I thought about our old joke and how innocent it had been. 2 people pretending storage space was the biggest conflict they would face. Then I locked the door and left the key in the realtor's box. My apartment stayed modest. Rental carpet, cheap blinds, folding table. I eventually bought a real desk, then a better couch, then a coffee maker that did not taste like electrical regret. My Sundays changed. At first, grocery shopping alone felt like walking around with a missing limb. I would reach for the cereal Melissa liked or pause near the flowers she used to buy for the kitchen. Then, slowly, Sunday became mine. I made lists for one. I cooked badly for one. I watched whatever I wanted without someone turning it into background noise for a group call. I slept in the middle of the bed. I stopped rehearsing explanations in my head for arguments that were not happening. People sometimes want a clean label for what happened. Was Melissa brainwashed? Was it financial betrayal? Emotional infidelity? A scam? A breakdown? It was probably pieces of all of that. But I stopped needing the perfect label. I had spent too many months trying to name the fire while standing inside the smoke. What I know is this. Love does not require you to stay available for someone determined to misread you. Compassion does not mean funding your own replacement. And boundaries are not only for the person who says the word the loudest. Melissa once told me she wanted to reclaim her identity. In the end, so did I. I lost the marriage, but I stopped losing myself. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.